that's my system overview. Before getting into the first of our accounting modules that I want to cover, I've got to introduce this whole web-based functionality. I'm going to use the term mobile device. Essentially, that's anything that's got a web browser. So it could be a smartphone, it could be a tablet, it could actually be a PC or a Mac, whatever can see the web and browse is interchangeable in the terminology I'll use. Excuse me. So just to create something of an overview in a very simplistic sense around the architecture, presently this triangle down here, this wedge, represents your Accrivia setup. Now whether you've got a server that's local within your building or whether you've got a hosted server up there on the cloud using remote desktop terminal sessions to connect in, whatever the case, the data is limited to your organisation and those that have access to that using a PC or a remote desktop session. What we're now doing is we're running a service on the server, and it's going to pump information up in a summarised format to another server that's actually up in the cloud, to use the terminology of the buzzwords at the moment. That information is then reflected down to the devices. Any information we collect from the devices comes back up, and the next time we do a sweep, that data is brought back in and inserted back into the Accrivia system. The reason this architecture is favourable from our perspective is that all communications are initiated out of your primary server, so there's no firewall changes, etc., where you're opening up a firewall for things to come poking in. Obviously we might get our data, but you might get something else that's actually not desirable. So the initialisation, the setup of all of this is very secure in terms of the firewalls, etc. It's sort of built on latest technology standards, etc. That's in a simple sense the architecture that we're going to run through in quite a few places today. The second thing I want to talk about in this area before we can go any further is an obvious question around users. So a user has a phone and they want to access certain data that's available through the Accrivia system, etc. How do we control what they can see and what they can do? You'll all be familiar with the system within Accrivia in terms of user access. It's along the same principles. Brand new menu called Web Users. And here we basically set up our users. So we have a username, which is their login name. Depending on the functionality that they've got access to and their role within the organisation will then depend on what else we enable for them. So here we're going to talk about today a bunch of people who have actually got the ability to collect start time and end times in a payroll perspective, timesheet data. We're also going to talk about, and that will tie into job supervisors and other sign-off sort of things. We're going to talk about raising purchase orders directly on a mobile device to suppliers for both jobs and just generally anything, stationery, etc. We're going to talk about KPI reports towards the end of the day and the whole ability to see literally key performance indicators around how your company's travelling in that area. And we're also going to talk about creditor invoice authorisation process. So we've entered an invoice, we don't want it paid until the appropriate people have stuck their thumb on it and said, yep, good to go, happy with the service, happy with the quality, happy with the price, we're right to pay it. So this screen represents where we set users up. One of the questions I had in the previous session was, do they have to be an Accrivia login user as such to actually be able to have this information exposed to them? No, they don't. They can be anybody. Quite literally anybody. So as long as they've got the appropriate username, you've got the password set up, etc., you will control what they can and can't do. They don't need a primary login to Accrivia.